A young lady was talking to me, and she said that, oh, some of these things that you say are so beautiful, but impractical. Well, at least for me, because she said, you say that we shouldn't worry about money and about supply. We shouldn't be so anxious about it. But if I didn't worry about my supply and didn't work hard and didn't think about it, how would I live? Well, I said, don't you think that there is a little matter there of opinion as to whether or not you are living? From my standpoint, you aren't. You're dead, but not yet buried. You work 8 or 9 hours in this cage writing figures in a book. And by the time you're through at night, you have a headache, don't you? Yes. And then you go home and you eat something, and what do you do then? Oh, I have to go to bed and get rest for the next day. Yes, so you can get another headache putting figures in a book. So you're really not living. You're just writing figures in a book and sleeping so that you can write more figures in a book, and you're not even doing it for a living, because actually when the week is around or the month, you haven't got a dime. Have you? Well, no, the cost of living is very high. Well, then what are you working for? That is, you see, there's a difference of opinion as to what constitutes life. We have some people in our Hawaii who have never in their lives put a figure in a book. As a matter of fact, who've never held a job. But they eat 3 meals a day. They sleep at night. Not only that, but they don't have headaches. Because when they want food, they get in a little boat and go out and fish for it. Or go in the backyard and grow it. And they do it merely to eat, because that isn't their real living. Their real living goes on about 16 hours a day. And you know what their real living is? They sing and play the guitar and they dance and make love. And that's their life. Just love and music, and incidentally a little fishing. Now, I don't know, you may think that they are dead but not buried. But I think they have something on their side to be said, because at least they're not just struggling to get a headache so that they can get some rest to get over the headache so they can get another headache. And so it is that some of you may have ideas quite different from those that I'm going to speak of. And some of those ideas may differ so radically that you might not enjoy this evening. But my function in being here is this: to tell you about this message of the Infinite Way, which began with a book called The Infinite Way and has since grown into 20-odd books in I don't know how many different editions and languages. I can tell you this, that the message of the Infinite Way is not a popular one. It is not one that is going to save the world, because the world is never going to hear about it. The world hasn't enough interest in it to investigate it. It isn't that kind of a message. It isn't a message of universal salvation. It isn't something that I could say to the world, if you adopt this, you will have long life, health, joy, and prosperity. Because ideas differ as to what constitutes prosperity and joy. No, I want to tell you this about the Infinite Way, that It had its beginning in the fact that I had personally an inner, let's call it hunger, or dissatisfaction with life. Not because I was a failure. When I was in school, I was an average student, never anything better, and not too much worse. So I had no failure to contend with in school. And within a year after I was out of school, I was getting along well enough so that I was made an assistant European buyer in an import house, and I began my European travels when I was 16 and a half years of age. And maybe I'm one of those unburied dead. I haven't settled down yet. I've been traveling ever since. I've had 3 homes, and none of them lasted more than 2 years. Been a failure at that kind of living. Been a failure at settling down. Probably a failure at settling up. But the point is this, that from my childhood, there was something inside of me that was dissatisfied with life as it is. I couldn't play games. I didn't enjoy them. I never have indulged in athletics. I didn't enjoy them. I had no use for marbles or tops or basketball or anything that amused the normal schoolboy. The only thing that I enjoyed was books. I just couldn't get enough of books. And my reading wasn't guided because I had nobody to guide me in the right reading. So it was a very indiscriminate reading, and therefore also a very unsatisfactory one. Well, when I started in the business world, and as I say, started to Europe at 16 and a half years of age, I saw the side of life that businessmen see. I saw living in nice hotels, going to nice restaurants to eat, going out to the nightclubs at night, going to the horse races on Saturday. I saw all of that and enjoyed it, but when I would get back to my room, that sense of not joy would be there, as much as to say, well, what about it? Now I've been out for the evening, and here I am, and what about it? I still am unsatisfied. I still am not content. I have no peace. And that was the reason that this search began that ended with this present work. I was looking for something to make me satisfied or complete. Money wouldn't do it. Restaurants wouldn't do it. Pastimes wouldn't do it. Travel wouldn't do it. And I suppose you could sum it up by saying that nothing in the external world would do it. And so the search ultimately led to the interior world. And right now you'll agree with me, some of you, that that interior world is not for all people. And so this was a lonesome search, and a long one because I had no guidance. Now ultimately, I found what was for me the answer. I found something that gave me inner peace and inner satisfaction. I found something that gave me a joy in life, not only that I could selfishly enjoy, but that I could enjoy with others and yet not have any headaches the next morning. The strange part of my individual experience was this, that when it came to a climax, it came in a way that I could not have foreseen, that I'd never heard that anyone else had ever had. Naturally, since then, I've learned of thousands of people to whom the same thing happened. But up to that time, because I had had no guidance in my reading or studying, I didn't know what it was that happened to me. I merely knew that I was living in a different world. In other words, I no longer enjoyed a game of cards, and I had really enjoyed cards as much as I could enjoy anything. I really had no more satisfaction in even a highball with dinner. I had no desire for it. I lost my desire for smoking. Not that there was anything sinful about it, but it just fell away. And all of these things that are a normal part of a businessman's life, especially a traveling businessman, these no longer appeal to me, but something else took its place, and something that it was a long time before I understood it. It began one day in a department store, just a few days after I had had this first, what we now call a spiritual experience, but which at that time I couldn't have named. I had a buyer, a woman who was an alcoholic. She'd already lost several fine jobs through drink, and she was about to lose another. But the sad thing was that she was acquiring a reputation that would have made it very soon impossible for her to get another job. And I had an appointment with her that day and sold her some merchandise and had dinner with her that evening. And out of a clear sky, she said to me, "You know, if you prayed for me, I could be healed." If I prayed for you, the only prayer I know is, "Now I lay me down to sleep." And I don't think that will heal anybody. "Oh, but you must know something about prayer." "Why must I?" "Well, I have that feeling that if you prayed for me, I could get well." I don't know anything about prayer, but if you feel that way, I'm certainly willing to try. So let's see what happens. And I closed my eyes. And you probably can tell right now that the only language I know is a businessman's language. So when I talk to God, I talk to him in straight out plain English. And I said, "God, here we are. What happens? I don't know how to pray. What's supposed to happen?" And God answered, "Man can't heal. Leave this with God." And that woman never again drank. She became a very prominent business executive in a very large chain of department stores. And I knew as little about it as you know at this minute. 2 days later, a traveling salesman came to me, and he said, "Joel, you know, you're one of the most successful salesmen on the road, but the poorest salesman. Everybody knows that. Everybody says that you're a horrible salesman, but somehow you do get good sales. And we've talked it over, and we think it's your religion. So I want to ask a favor of you. I have chronic hiccups, and the doctors can't heal it, medicine can't heal it, and they're painful. And he said they go on sometimes for 2 or 3 months, and then they'll stop for a couple of weeks, and they'll start over again. So whatever this religion is of yours that gives you good business in spite of being a bad salesman, will you use it and pray for me for my health?" And I said, "I'm sorry, I haven't any religion. I don't belong to any church. I don't know anything about religion. But if you think that my praying for you will help, I'll be glad to. So I closed my eyes and I said, well, here, Father, we are again. And before any answer could come, this man tapped me and said, they've stopped. That was that. Now, you know, this thing went on for 15 months, growing and growing and growing, one after another coming to me and saying, will you pray for me? Will you heal me? And some of them getting very remarkable results. And one day my business associate said to me, I don't know why you don't wake up. You've had 22 telephone calls today, not one of them from a customer, all of them from people who want to be healed. And so that was my entrance into this work. I quit the business world that day. Now, I can say to you, very frankly, that I didn't know what healed those people, unless you want to use the word God. And that's a very unsatisfactory word to use, because you haven't the faintest idea what I mean by the word God, and at that time, I wouldn't have had any idea either what it was, except that it was spelled G-O-D, but I had no meaning for the word, and I knew that most people who did speak of God had some different meaning than others. So I really couldn't have told you truthfully what did this healing work. I couldn't have told you truthfully what it was that had taken place inside of me. I can only tell you now what it was. I can only tell you that this desire for something greater than what I was finding in the human world, a desire that went on for many, many years, ultimated in that experience in which something in the interior world became evident to me, even though I couldn't have described it. Now then, I started to study the subject of spiritual healing, and I couldn't find anything in print that gave me a satisfactory answer. I became a Christian Science practitioner so as to have a place to operate, and because it was the nearest thing to spiritual healing that I had heard about. But never believed for a minute that I understood how Christian Science healed, nor could I ever use its method. My healing work has never varied from the beginning, just being still, waiting until something takes place inside, which if you must use language, we'll say is the Spirit of God or presence of God, and then healing takes place. I have nothing to do with it. It's something that just takes place within me. But I continued this search, and what I found eventually took me outside of the Christian Science Church, because I found that there are different types of healing. I won't speak of physical healing, because you know all about those. But there are types of mental healing, psychological healing, more or less successful, usually less successful, but here and there somewhat successful. But I learned this, that in some of the movements like Christian Science, Divine Science, Unity, more especially those three, that there were certain people who had experiences like I did. They made a contact with something within themselves, and they became healers. Some of them really believed that it was Christian Science healing or Unity healing or Divine Science healing, and it never was. It just was that they had touched this inner thing, this spirit, and through it they healed. The proof of it is that some of them who were Christian Science healers left Christian Science and went to Unity or went to Divine Science, and they still were healers. It didn't make any difference where they went. The teaching had nothing to do with it. It was this contact. Now, healing is only one side of life, and a very small side. Healing is not very important. It isn't so important whether a person is sick or well. The important thing is whether they discover a principle of life to live by. Because no matter how well they are, and no matter how rich they are, if they haven't a principle of life to live by, they are part of the living dead, the unburied dead. On the other hand, a person may have certain physical afflictions, but have found some spiritual thing within and find more peace and more happiness than those that are well or those that are rich. So I quickly learned that healing was not the great undertaking of life. It was merely, let us call it, an evidence of something else. Call it an effect of something else. And what this something else is this. The something else is a way of life whereby we not only feel or find freedom from discords and inharmonies, but we find our inner peace with ourselves and an ability to live with this world and to live harmoniously with this world, not in unfair competition, not by fighting each other, not by warring with each other, but by some mode of life that enables us to be friends. A way of life, for instance, which would enable this world to be governed without wars. There is such a thing. And there is such a thing that will enable this world to live without labor and capital warfare. Those are the things that interested me. Those are the things that became more important to me than just healing somebody's cold or grip or flu or occasionally consumption or once in a while a cancer. Those were all right in their way, but that was not the goal of life. The goal of life is to find a way whereby we, all of us, can live in harmonious relationships with each other and, through the way of life, probably establish some mode of government on earth that would bring harmony to the world. Well, of course, the Master called that government the kingdom of God, the realm of God. And you will remember that because he preached this higher government, he was enabled to be crucified by the Roman government on the charge of the Hebrew church, the Jewish church, because they were able to bring the charge against him that he was preaching a different kingdom than the Roman kingdom. Well, he was, but he wasn't interested in overthrowing the Roman regime. He was interested in bringing to light not another form of human government, but a divine government in human affairs. Now then, as my own life unfolded, and study and patience and experiences unfolded, I discovered that there is a secret of life that has been known to many mystics throughout the history of the world, which, if it had been permitted to circulate among mankind, by this time would really have established peace on earth and goodwill to men. But each time that this principle is revealed through some mystic, ways are found of organizing it and destroying it. And so it is that time after time, this secret is lost from the world. The earliest record of this secret that I have found dates back to King Solomon's temple. During the building of King Solomon's temple, when supposedly the beginning of Masonry was given to the world, not in the form that Freemasonry is today, however, but in its beginning in that temple, it was promised to the workmen that if they worked the full time until the temple was completed, that they would be given a secret password. And once in possession of this secret password, they could travel to any part of the world they wanted and command a master's wages. Just the possession of this secret password, and automatically they would be entitled to a master's wages. Well, evidently that was a very glorious thing to look forward to, but unfortunately a circumstance took place, and this secret word was lost. It wasn't rediscovered until 1890. And then a 33rd degree Mason who was determined that his life work would be spent in uncovering and discovering that password, because it was so important. If it was going to entitle a man to master's wages in any part of the world, it must be something very powerful. And so he devoted his life to the discovery of this lost secret password, and he discovered it. He published it, but the Masonic fraternity is not interested in it because it has built its ritual around a work which makes unnecessary that original lost word. And so he published his book, and undoubtedly some thousands of Masons read it, but so far as the rest of the world is concerned, it's lost. And as a matter of fact, I know now that it would be relatively unimportant even if everybody in the world had a copy of this book, because I have learned that you cannot give anyone the secret of life. It won't do them any good until they have spent 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7 years in preparation for it. Then when it comes to them, it comes with power and understanding, and they can do something with it. I have found that this is true in my own work. I never expect any student of the Infinite Way even to understand its principles until they've read it for 3 or 4 years at least. And then I usually take 3 or 4 more years before I give them the final word that I know will set them free. Now, I can tell you this password, and not with any hope that it will benefit you, but merely to show you that this was only one of a series of discoveries of this same password, and that all of them have been lost, and the world has not benefited from them. The password that, if a person knows, will enable them to travel this entire world and always command a master's wages is this: I am. That's the secret password. Anyone who knows this, anyone who keeps it within their consciousness, will ultimately discover that never again can they lack for any good thing. Never again can they know serious disease or sin or poverty or hate or injustice. Now, I, of course, do not know how many times that same word was discovered and lost, but you know that we come upon it again in the man Moses, the Hebrew leader. Moses, after 21 years, is it, of living in the wilderness, meditating, communing with God, seeking spiritual enlightenment, all of a sudden receives this word, I am. I am that I am. That's the name of God. I am. And you know, Moses, who was shepherding in the hills at the time, very quickly became the leader of the Hebrew people, took them out of their slavery, out of a great deal of their ignorance, superstition, and led them into a somewhat freer sense of life. Now, he didn't make too much progress with them because he had very bad material. If it is possible for you to realize what any slave people are when they're first released from slavery, you will know that with them, liberty and license very quickly get mixed up. And you will know that they do not know how to use liberty. They do not know how to benefit from it. It is like the wage slaves of today. They are now being given 40-hour weeks, 36-hour weeks, 33-hour weeks, and in the United States they're appealing for 30-hour weeks. But they don't know what to do with it. Just drink more gin or whiskey. Just buy more obscene magazines. Just look at more fake wrestling matches. They have no idea what to do with their liberty, and they go through a very sad period. They are going through today, and they're going through something worse in the next 10 years because they are going to have more liberty and more money. As this mechanical age comes in, they are going to be given 30 hours a week of work, but they're going to be given the equivalent of 90 hours a week of pay. And you know what they're going to do with it, most of them. You have a fair sample of it here and in the newsprint. And that's only because they are not yet enlightened on what men can and will ultimately do with free time, with spare time, with time that doesn't have to be spent just adding up a column of figures in a book for 7 days a week. Now then, Moses did the best he could with those people, but he had a difficult time, and each time that he tried to assure them that God was Emmanuel, or ever present with them, because they couldn't see this God, feel God, smell God, or taste or touch God, they would turn back to that which they could see and touch, whether it was a golden calf, or whether it was Baal, or whether it was some of the other heathen forms of worship. The Hebrews continuously turned away from the one true God to some form of idolatry, which means the worship of something that's visible or audible or humanly knowable. And so they always lost their way. There were several fine Christian prophets, Hebrew prophets, who really gave them marvelous messages. Elijah, Elisha, Isaiah. But it was always the same thing. It takes thousands of years for people to become civilized. Takes thousands of years for people to come from a state of total spiritual darkness to some measure of light, to the development of a spiritual discernment that will enable them to see and understand something that is invisible, inaudible. Now, when Jesus Christ came upon the scene, he again gave the world the teaching of God as I am. And he added to the term I am, explained it by calling it the Father within me, the Father within you, my Father and your Father. But at least we know this, that out of his 3 years of ministry, he revealed that there is a something within you. You may call it God if you like, or nature, or a Father within. Paul gave it still a different name. He called it the Christ. He said, I can do all things through the Christ. Or, I live, yet not I, Christ liveth my life. And in the Hebrew language, the same word as Christ is Emmanuel, God with us. In the Greek language, the Christ is Savior. And so you'll find that regardless of what language you use, the Master taught that that which is your and my individual salvation is not something afar off. It is something within you and within me. Now, in his own way, he named it. He not only told where it was, but he told what it was. And do you know that the power of his teaching was so tremendous, even though it was not written down in manuscripts, for he never wrote a word that we know anything about at this time, and the disciples wrote nothing down for 30 years after the crucifixion. Although it wasn't written, it was so indelibly impressed in consciousness and so powerful in being transmitted from him to the disciples, to the apostles, to those who went abroad teaching, that for 300 years, thousands of people found their freedom from sin, disease, death, lack, and limitation through this teaching. For 300 years, it made people so free that governments began to get alarmed because these people couldn't be made slaves. Once they knew the secret word of God, you couldn't enslave them anymore. You couldn't mistreat them. There was nothing you could do with them because they could just laugh at you and walk away. They had the secret, the demonstrable secret. And it was then that a government decided to form a church and did, and ultimately destroyed, removed from the earth this password, this secret of the name and the nature of God. And ever since then, for 1,700 years, with the exception of, let us say, 100 mystics who have discovered and rediscovered it, it has, so far as the world is concerned, been lost. It has never been entirely lost. There is a book published in London by the Oxford Press called the book of English mystical verse. And it is a compilation of the writings of all the Englishmen who have attained the mystical estate, and in it received this same secret. Now, they all wrote about it, and they all wrote poems about it, and some wrote prose about it, and it has circulated, but no one has accepted it as a way of life. From the 12th to the 17th centuries, there were mystics in Europe, all the way from Switzerland across to England, who knew this secret and who taught it, and who also demonstrated such great things that the church persecuted them and wiped it off the face of the earth again, imprisoned them, destroyed their manuscripts, disgraced them publicly, did everything to be sure that this teaching would be hidden or lost. And it was lost. Now, never lost, only hidden from the sight of the great public that should know it. The great public should know it for this reason. Knowing this truth will set you free. Ye shall know the truth, and the truth will make you free. This truth will free you of most of your diseases. This truth will free you from the effects of old age. This truth will free you from poverty, from dependence on man whose breath is in his nostrils. This truth will actually enable those who have an inner discernment to find a way of life by which they can prove such passages from Scripture as these. He that dwelleth in the secret place of the Most High, none of these evils shall come nigh his dwelling place. 1,000 may fall at your left and 10,000 may fall at your right, but it will not come nigh you. Well, here's another one. Thou wilt keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on thee. Here's another one. This is life eternal, to know thee, the one true God. This is life eternal, to know what God is. To know what God is means life eternal for anyone who discovers it. Now then, into my individual life, with no religious background, came this awareness. One day, and remember, this is quite a miracle. All of my ancestry is Hebrew. Not by religion, but by blood. But nevertheless Hebrew. And yet the voice said to me, Jesus Christ has the secret of life. Find him and get it. And throughout my life, Jesus Christ has been the central theme. And the teachings of Jesus Christ are the foundations of the entire work that we call the infinite way. And to prove to you that Jesus Christ is not merely a Christian mystic or Christian leader or Christian religionist, I may say to you that I am personally acquainted with more than 20 men who never have been Christians, who are in their own faith religious leaders, who have discovered the Christ. Hebrews, Indians, Muslims. Oh yes. When you discover the Christ, you do not discover a man who lived 2,000 years ago. You discover a teaching that that man revealed to the world. He very definitely said that all this world may pass away, but my words never will pass away. He very definitely said, if I go not away, the Comforter will not come to you. So it isn't the man, the historical man, that can save us any more than Buddha can or anyone else. But this message, this word that will never pass away, this will save individuals, communities, nations, and ultimately the entire world. Now, we only have a small audience here tonight, and you may wonder why, if this message is so powerful and so wonderful, that we haven't taken a big theater or an arena and filled it to give this message. And I'm going to tell you the answer. It wouldn't do any good. The world couldn't receive it. Not now any more than it did when Jesus gave it or Moses gave it. Only those who, for some reason unknown to us, have some inner intuitional guidance can receive it. A man once read The Infinite Way, and then he read it a second time, and then he said to his wife, "This man stole this from me if I had written it." And I've had dozens of people say, "Well, you've just written down what I've always known." Those are the only people who can receive this and respond to it. If it is already in your heart, if you are already ready for the unfoldment, you can receive it and benefit, and otherwise there's no use. The Master couldn't even give it to his own mother. When his mother came to visit him, he had to say, "Who is my mother?" And then turn to the disciples and say, "You are. Not that lady who gave birth to me. You. You are my mother, you disciples." He had to say that you might have to leave mother and brother and sister and father because they weren't ready for this message. And so it is today. There isn't one of us who demonstrates this, who can give it to the nearest and dearest of our own family until they themselves also become ready for it. I've experienced that. I'm in this 27 years. I have witnessed many, many wonderful women try to give it to their husbands too soon. I have witnessed men in this work who couldn't give it to their wives. I have witnessed families who couldn't give it to their children. And the answer is always the same. Jesus says, "Who do men say that I am?" "Oh, men say that you're a resurrected Hebrew." "Who do you say that I am?" Peter, with this great vision, which didn't come from his brain, Peter says, "Thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God." And Jesus says, "Yes, that's true. But flesh and blood didn't teach you that. You didn't learn that from man. You got that from the Father within." And of his own teaching, he said, "If I speak of myself, I bear witness to a lie. My doctrine is not mine, but his that sent me. I'm just the instrument giving it to this age." So it is that if I sit in my little bungalow in Hawaii and meditate and commune with God, you know what happens? I get invitations from Africa, from Australia, from England, from Scotland, to come and talk about this. But you'd be surprised that if I sent out anywhere and asked for an invitation, I would be told that they were too busy. In the same way, when the manuscript was first presented to the publishers in New York, they were unanimous in turning it down, and they were unanimous in the reason. It's a beautiful book, but it's so impractical that nobody will ever pay to buy it. Well, you know, since then, some of the biggest publishers in the world, including England, Germany, Switzerland, Holland, have written and asked permission to print it. It was because they, in their own intuition, discerned something in it that had to be brought to light. There is no promotion with our work. There is no advertising. And the reason is this, that when I received the final instructions that put me into this work, the words that came to me from within were these: never seek a student. Accept those who come to you. And that's what I've been doing ever since. I have never advertised for a student or for anyone to read my books. But those who find the books, or those who find the teachings, or those who invite me, I come and tell about it. And the reason is this. I say this to you, that in this book, which is the King James Version of the Bible, is the secret of the Word, the name, the nature of God. And likewise, the secret for living it and bringing it into individual experience. And therefore, since all men cannot receive that, I wait for those who can. Now may I say this to you? The message of the Christ, while it isn't for everybody at this particular moment, is the message that ultimately will save the world. I don't know if you can believe this, but man has not yet discovered anything that can save civilization from destroying itself. When he fought with clubs, some wiser man came along with bows and arrows, and the fellows with the clubs were always defeated. But when somebody came along with gunpowder, that ended bows and arrows, and then came our big guns, and then came our blockbusters, and then came our atomic bombs. Always bigger and more powerful matter was used to settle the arguments of the world, and I'm sure none of you believe that the arguments of the world or problems have been settled. In the same way, there have been many such things as disarmament conferences, and there have been many such things as League of Nations and United Nations. They can't save the world. They can't do it because they can't be any better than the men who govern them. And in one year there may be some very fine men there, and they do a fine work, and the next year some villains are there, and they do a very bad work. So they can't be instruments ever for a permanent settlement. But I will tell you what can and what will ultimately overcome the discords of this world. And that is just what it says here. This is life eternal, to know him aright. In my 27 years in this work, I have witnessed this knowledge heal people of disease. I have witnessed it stop epidemics in cities. I have witnessed it stop strikes in capital and labor cases. I have witnessed it give good government through men in government who were living by it. I have witnessed this on almost every kind of a scale that you might call individual or collective on a small scale. I have never yet seen it govern a nation. I have never yet seen it govern a church. I have never yet seen it govern a large body of people. But if it is true that 2 times 2 are 4, then it must be true of all the multiples of 2 times 2. And if it is true that knowing the nature of God will save you or me individually, or will bring peace to a business, or to a capital labor relationship, then it must be true that eventually that knowledge will cover the globe, and that knowledge will do what nothing else has done. I would like, just for a second, don't know what time it is, it's very nearly our time, but I would just like to tell you one of the things that happens when you know this password. The moment that you know, and when I say know, I mean have an inner feeling, a conviction, that the kingdom of God is within you, that this God power is within you, that its very presence is where you are, from that moment on, you do not need anybody out here. You don't have to lie about anything, to anybody, for anything. You don't have to cheat. You don't have to defraud. You don't have to steal. You don't have to deceive. Why? Because there isn't anybody out here that has anything that I can't get from the Father within me. Therefore, why should I bother to do any lying, cheating,